Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Writers' Rants, brought to you by Camille's Harem. Not just a podcast for novice writers by novice writers, but also a YouTube channel by novice writers for novice writers. Because writing is an adventure, it's more fun with friends. And this episode will kick off something that is particularly fun, something that I've been very excited to do. All the way back when I did my rant on the show Ruby and its payoff, I suggested that I could take a look into some of the series' many fights and break them down from a writer's viewpoint so as to help us all improve our own action writing. And as I looked at what other YouTubers out there were pitching as far as the analyses of these fight scenes and more, I became more and more convinced that this was something I had to do. Now, I may just be a novice writer, but most of my stories, really all of my stories, revolve around action, drawn-out battles, violent plots, and dazzling heroics on the battlefield. Not to brag or anything, I'm bragging here, I'm giving myself a good pat on the back. I have written hundreds of pages, well over 100,000 words worth of fight and action scenes. I have done raids on the high seas, personal duels, gunfights, mental assaults, chase scenes, massive field battles, sieges, mecha combat, magical chaos, and gods leveling armies. So yeah, I feel like I might have something to contribute to the conversation of writing action scenes, and especially fight scenes. A lot of other fight reviewers out there will ramble on about stuff such as hitting the beats and believability. With enough conviction in anyone's voice and tossing around some big words and key phrases that make them sound like experts, it's really easy to believe that a fight must be written in some sort of mechanical pattern-esque way. But as I looked at what a whole bunch of other people have done on YouTube when it comes to breaking down and analyzing fights, it just feels like they're missing out on a lot of the things that writers should be focusing on. So it's time for a novice to step in and do the job. With this rant, I will explain how I personally analyze and approach fights in all forms of media, and how I use the same method to analyze and break down my own fights as I write them out. I admit right off the bat, once again, that I am a novice, but that should not take away from the value of my insights. And what I hope is that the process that I have been using will benefit you in some way when it comes to writing your own action scenes. So, this will be my rant, how to write good fights, how to break them down, how to analyze them. But what's more is that for the rest of the summer, until the end of August, every Wednesday I will be releasing a special video as a part of our summer extravaganza of content. I will be releasing a special fight analysis video. And these videos will be made up of suggestions from members of the Harem and also from you, the viewers and listeners. So this is a great opportunity for you to get into the comment section and let me know what kind of canon fight, and I stress canon as in it's happened in a book, a movie, or show already, what kind of a canon fight you would like me to take a closer look at, break down, analyze, and then pull some good writing advice out of. So please, make sure you get down there into the comment section, give me a fight, any kind of fight, as long as it's canon, and I will respond to it, and I will see if I am able to do a review of it this summer. And if you want to be notified of when those videos come on out, then please remember to subscribe and click the bell icon. So, with all of that explanation done, let's get on to the meat of this rant. There are two big questions to ask before you write or analyze a fight. Number one, what kind of a story is this? And number two, what is the purpose of this fight? For the first question, what kind of a story is this? You need to consider the genre of the story and the medium in which you're telling it, the story's contents, and the mechanics that make up the entire tale. First, the genre and the medium will dictate a lot of what you can expect for any fight or action sequence. Romance and horror, for example, have shorter bursts of action, relying more on the drama and build-up previous to give those bursts of action a good full punch. Whereas fantasy and science fiction, while they will also, if they want to deliver a good fine punch, will take their time in building everything up, these genres are geared more towards having long drawn out bouts and having more of that kind of action. And so you can expect, especially in these ones, to have larger fights, larger stakes, and much more complicated built-in mechanics. And that's because they just rely more so than things such as romance and horror on these action sequences to resolve their problems. An important point to also make is that when you look at instance to something like anime and manga, which once again people might think, well, I'm right now writing a book, why should I care so much about that? Well, because manga and anime are having a greater influence now in Western culture. It's something that we as writers here in the West should not be blind to. We should think about how people elsewhere abroad in the world are using their culture and their experiences and their own forms of media to talk about action, how they communicate their fight and their action sequences. So, for example, think about if you've ever watched a shonen anime, it's super hypersensitive to the thought process and to the basic mechanics of the fight that's happening in the moment. And that's something that you don't get a lot of in Western literature. And so this is something, once again, to bear in mind. The medium and the genre have a massive impact on how you will write your action sequences. Secondly, how does the story itself dictate the action? Consider for a moment, will you, the Da Vinci Code. It would be an entirely different story if it was not for Silas the albino monk and the police chasing Robert Langdon all in one crazy night. And Dragon Ball was never meant to be a slice of life. And the Care Bears were never meant to face off against a Thanos-like character. The themes, the stories, the characters all together intertwined into the story that you are writing determine the kind of fights and action sequences that you as a writer will put together and what readers will expect from you. However, in this regard, the most important thing to remember here is that you are going to write the story that you want to write. So if you want to have superheroes stuck in a slice of life story, that is up to you. Or if you want to have teddy bears going on a murder spree, well, once again, that is your story, and feel free to write that. Thirdly, always bear in mind the mechanics of your story. Are you trying to make it more realistic, for instance? And how much blood do people have? Liters versus Olympic swimming pools amount of blood. This is pretty important here. What about physics, magic, and how far has science gone? Or machinery? All of these are crucial, as well as how you mix them together. And so, for example, why this is really important to bear in mind, think about, for instance, the consequences of destroying a moon. For instance, in the story of Naruto, you can very well use magic to split the moon in half and it won't destroy the world. Why? Well, because this is an anime in which magic can do those kinds of things and where consequences can be reversed if you happen to know the right kind of stuff to do. Whereas if you are in James Cameron's Avatar, where he tries to make things a little bit more realistic, if you were to destroy just one of the many moons floating around the moon Pandora, it would probably cause tidal waves that would wipe out at least half, if not all, of the life on that little rock. And when you look then at a show such as Ruby, the moon is cracked and destroyed in the background, and it's absolutely beautiful, and guess what? We're just supposed to right now take it as it is. We'll probably get an answer later on down the road, which I'm really looking forward to, but once again, this is a world in which, physics really operate kind of differently than they do in real life. And so you shouldn't take Avatar-esque physics and apply them to something such as Ruby and Naruto. Why? Well, because they're totally different stories. And this is something that you definitely don't get when it comes down to like Death Battle or other people doing reviews where they say, this is totally stupid. It would never be this way. No, you have to once again think about the mechanics within that story, not the mechanics within other stories. And this is something that's very critical when it comes to writing, once again, a good fight and also analyzing and understanding fights. So now then, moving on to the second question, what is the purpose of this fight? You must consider what led up to the fight, how did the fight play out, and its consequences. These help you understand the makeup of the fight, not just its bare mechanics. There's a whole lot more that goes into understanding a good fight scene. So the buildup of the fight helps you to understand the stakes that are involved. And you should know all the characters involved, their abilities, and their reasonings for being in this fight. And the only time that you can really break away from that is if this fight in question that you have is really either a throwaway fight or if it's an introductory fight. And I'll get more into that later on in this video. And as for the fight itself, how it plays out, this is going to be unique to every story. So once again, you write the fight that you want. And this is where suggestions such as follow the beat can be a little bit more harmful than helpful, because some fights are just not meant to follow a certain beat. Some fights are just going to be very messy, and some people like myself write fights very organically. This means that once we just start writing, yeah, we have a certain idea of where this fight's going, but it ends up being often a whole lot different than how we might have originally put it on out. So not everyone can follow a simple pattern as to how a fight works. And then finally, for the conclusions or the consequences of this fight, this is extremely important, because this is really what determines a fight's precedence within a story. Yes, you can set the stakes as high as you want, but if saving the world only merits a page of celebration or discussion, then it was of less worth than an arm wrestling match that gets a whole chapter's worth of reflection and is constantly referenced throughout the story. The farther reaching the consequences of a fight, the more importance it will have. Yes, some amazingly flashy and emotional fights will be long remembered in the hearts and minds of the fans, but if their reach only goes so far in the stories, well, then it's not that important of a fight, no matter how much we like it. And so take, for example, the fight between Deku and Todoroki in the Sports Festival arc from My Hero Academia, as opposed to the Provisional License Exam arc within the same series. Though the fight between Todoroki and Deku was far more emotional and was just dripping with amazing deep insight and meaning, its apparent consequences pale in comparison to the Provisional License Exam. And so, let me explain this a little bit further, just in case I might have lost you right there. If you want a really great rundown of just why the Deku vs. Todoroki fight is so amazing, then please go and check out the fight analysis from My Mother's Basement. What's in a good fight? There's a link below to that video, and there's no denying that this is a well set up match for Deku and Todoroki, where on one hand you have Deku trying to embody the values of what a hero is by looking to his personal mentor and hero, All Might. And this clashes with Todoroki, who is desperately trying to distance himself from his douchebag father Endeavor by winning only using his brutal ice powers. The match itself is wonderfully choreographed with devastating displays of power, impassioned speeches, and ideology being pushed to the forefront. And Deku loses this match but wins the far greater ideological battle and helps save Todoroki from his own self-destructive ways. The chapter in both manga and anime is called Todoroki Origins. However, after the tournament arc, we get 3 brief mentions of how Todoroki is faring after the match. They are his and these 3 include his reasoning for drafting under his father Endeavor, lighting a fire for his friends while they're camping, and telling Deku that he sticks his nose into sensitive biz. For Deku, as far as the importance of this fight goes, it's mentioned only twice! Once by Shigaraki, and once, way later on, by Gentle. For such an important fight, this is practically nothing in the form of follow-through. Granted, the adventures that do come afterwards are pretty big, they push the plot along really far, and they give enormous development to many of the other characters within Class 1A. However, once again, looking at this fight, it just seems to fall in the shadows of what happens next really quickly, despite its fantastic build-up. However, on the other hand, the Provisional License Exam carries with it extreme weight as it serves up for all the later arcs, a redemption arc for Bakugo and Todoroki. It also sets up Deku and Kirishima to participate in the Cleansers arc where they face off against Overhaul and his minions, and that has a massive amount of importance to the progressing of the overall plot and helping the characters become better heroes. It also lays the groundwork for the legal complications and parameters that the fledgling heroes have to work within. And so this hilariously messy exam that is that's just basically a giant free-for-all, is so extremely important for all of the arcs that come afterwards in the manga and what people will later on see in the anime. Without a doubt, the provisional license exam arc carries just so much weight with it, because we can see the consequences of that exam throughout the rest of the story as it progresses. Now then, though consequences are very important for the bigger fights, there are the throwaway fights. Yes, I'm finally coming back to that. These are bouts of action that help keep the pace of the story up and give context to character development in the moment. These are meant to be flashy and not extremely important. They also serve at times as introductions for new characters. The Wheel of Time does this often in the earlier books, where just we have a random fight and huzzah, here's a new character, such as Awesome Bane. Oh my gosh, I love that guy. So it's therefore crucial that you as a writer determine exactly what kind of a fight you're writing right here. Is this one going to be a throwaway, or is this one an important one? And depending on that, you have to write it accordingly with the proper setup and with the proper follow-through of consequences. So as I do my analyses of other fights throughout the rest of the summer, I will break down further elements within the fight itself that are critical to writing a good and engaging fight or action sequence. So and that's just because if I were to try to list as many mechanics as I know right here and now, this video would be overly long and it would be pretty boring. So for now, let these little bits of insight suffice before we delve into the real fun of breaking down fights and analyzing them within the future videos. So first off, fights are very messy. We write choreography to make them manageable and followable. Follow through? That people can read them without getting lost. But really, fights are never straightforward events. Fights are brutal in some fashion or another, and every fight is emotional. It's actually really rare to find someone who is totally stone cold in the middle of battle and is able to think with exact strategy. Not even capable veterans are able to hold back all of their emotions and passions when it comes to a fight and think everything through clearly. So if you're going for if you're tending more towards the side of realistic, you should keep that in mind when it comes to writing fights. If you're just going for straight up entertaining fantasy, then that's something that, once again, you want to keep things emotional because that's how people get invested, but then you can kind of be a little bit more gracious with letting people think things through. So that's a pretty good insight right there. I think that's something that I've heard from multiple accomplished writers already, getting a chance to talk with them. And lastly, to reiterate the point I made earlier, stick to the mechanics of your story. Consistency is a crucial key to keeping your action manageable and engaging. And, well, that's it for now. Remember that the first fight analysis will be this Wednesday. It will be looking into the fight between Sean Ilariel and Vin the Mistborn from Brandon Sanderson's book Mistborn, The Final Empire. And once more, if you have a fight that you want me to break down and analyze, please tell me what it is in the comment section below. And as you wait for Wednesday to roll around, check out our podcast where we will have more discussions that we do as a group that will help you improve your writing. And you can find Camille's Harem on Podbean, iTunes, and Google Play. And the links for those are in the description box. And we also have Tumblr and Pinterest for your enjoyment, and especially if you're looking for homework on how you can improve your writing. And if you want to engage in deeper discussions with us as a group, please go to our Reddit page, where you will find plenty of conversations going on, where hopefully you can network with other writers. Once again, all of the links for that will be in the description box. And lastly, please send us links to your favorite bad fanfics via our Twitter at Camille's Harem, so that way we can do epic readings of them for your enjoyment. So until the next video, tschüss.